Is it true that in some states they don't teach you about the genocide of American Indians? I grew up in California in the 80s and 90s. We learned about the Trail of Tears. We learned how the US repeatedly broke its treaties with the native population. We talked about how Native Americans were killed or driven from their homes during westward expansion. I don't think the word genocide was used though. Yerk, I didn't learn all the grisly details until I took AP History my junior year. I think it was glossed over before that Texas BTW. It's not exactly that, but yes. They tend to just gloss over the various acts and tragedies as just them being in the way of progress. Where I grew up in Minnesota, we had a big Native American population, so we learned about stuff like the massacre in Mankato. We even had a whole unit on the numerous broken treaties and deals. Meanwhile, on the other side of the river in Wisconsin, they didn't. It was a blit next to the other westward expansion stuff. I was taught about the Trail of Tears in school. My teacher was really passionate about what a horrible crime it was, also about spreading disease with blankets. I went to school in Oregon, Utah over here, and the last 2-3 years they changed the curriculum a lot. My 18-year-old senior in high school has taken the same history classes I took. Only, now they gloss over the parts that are violent in the making of our state. My 16-year-old had no clue about even 12 of the tribes from our area. We had songs to learn them all in school, 18 years ago, when I graduated. Now, nothing. It's like they are ashamed of our state's history. Which, I mean, it was atrocious, but we shouldn't forget so it doesn't happen again. Something that may or may not be helpful in answering your question. Utah has also altered how they teach about slavery and the Civil War. It's being romanticized, and all the parts we actually learn from are left out. If it is negative, bloody, and honest, it's not in Utah's history books anymore. In southern Alabama, we went over it pretty in depth, especially in 5th grade. I remember it being talked about a lot. The overall consensus and vibe I've gotten from teachers and the general population whenever Native American Indians are mentioned is that they were taken advantage of and horrendously treated. Def giving the US villain vibes when taught about during those events. There are a lot of students who don't pay attention to what we teach in class. A teacher tired of repeating myself all the time. I was taught about it. Not genocide, but the unfair way the Indians, Native Americans I am old were treated, and Sitting Bull. Probably others, but I remember him. Hate to be a downer, but it doesn't really matter what they teach in school. At least 85-90 of kids are distracted and not paying attention. The rest already think they have all the answers. Talk to any HS graduate. It's stunning how little they know, especially in the history department. Many states skip the bad parts of history because it's too hard for kids. They may teach it, but they absolutely downplay how horrifically cold-blooded it was. Back in the early 90s, we learned the Trail 9F Tears ends about Chief Joseph and his "I will fight John Moore forever" speech. That was it. As an adult, I delved deeper, and now I'm teaching my kids more in depth. People tend to hide their shameful pasts. I grew up in Oregon in the 80s and it was all laid bare. I met someone not too long ago from Ohio, a college student, who had never heard of the Trail of Tears or Manifest Destiny. I come from TN, and growing up I was taught a few things backwards. I was told of the horror the North committed on the South and how horrible the Northern generals were. Okay, must have been really hard not being able to use people as free labor only to see them freed by the damn North. I learned the Trail of Tears was a necessary act by Andrew Jackson. Yeah, the Native Removal Act surely wasn't a horror that led to mass death and forced people into land that wasn't even their tribes. In Illinois here, we learned that the colonists and Native Americans had disputes over the land even though they taught each other so much about each of their ways of life. And the Trail of Tears was a really long time ago when the government made people walk a long way to a reservation. Whole families had to walk. So we got the sense that we wouldn't approve of what happened by today's standards. But it was never painted as a genocide or ethnic cleansing for land. It's crazy how much variation there is in education about this. A side note, I cannot stand when people act like everything was perfect before white settlers. Like Pocahontas and shit. There was constant war between the natives. We were not the rock that made the ripples in the glimmer glass pond. Genocide? No. But I'm pretty sure everyone learns about what happened, just not in that critical of a lens. There's a lot not taught up here in Canada too, like how the Haida practiced slavery 500 years before contact. Or how about the Comanche-Apache Wars and their absolute determination to finish each other off. Hell, in my neck of the woods the Snake Indians were completely exterminated. True definition of the word genocide by the Stoney Indians. Invited to a peace gathering, ambushed and exterminated. Think Red Wedding, Game of Thrones. Works both ways. Guess we all have shit we'd rather not talk about. Native Americans, indigenous people. Most American history classes use textbooks that whitewash what actually happened and paint the US and the colonizers therein in a positive light.